All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today we're going deep into South African politics and economics, kind of the roller coaster that is South Africa.
Yeah.
We got IMF assessments. We've got some really hard-hitting articles from Engineering News, Business Tech, MoneyWeb, and even a little snippet from a podcast that I think you'll find quite interesting.
Sounds like quite a mix. Should be an interesting deep dive.
Yeah. So let's dive right in, huh?
Okay.
One of the things that jumped out at me right away was this whole thing with Eskom.
Right.
Engineering News is reporting that they posted a 16 billion rand profit for the first half of the year.
Yeah.
Which is a huge GE turnaround from what they were doing before.
Yeah, it seems like they've managed to turn things around, at least financially.
Yeah, well, that's what makes it so interesting.
Right.
Because then Business Tech and Engineering News also report that NERSA, which is the energy regulator, they just approved a 12.74% tariff increase for Eskom starting April 1st.
Oh.
So they're making all this profit.
Yeah.
But we're still getting hit with these higher electricity prices.
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of people are wondering about that, and it's raising questions about Eskom's efficiency.
Yeah.
Are they actually managing things properly?
Right.
You have to remember that NERSA has granted Eskom significant tariff hikes over the years.
Right.
Often at Eskom's request.
Yeah.
And now they're reporting a profit, and they're back asking for more.
Right. So is this just a case of Eskom trying to squeeze as much money out of South Africans as they can? Or is there something more to it?
Well, I mean, I think it's definitely leading to a lot of skepticism.
Right.
And not just from ordinary South Africans. The Democratic Alliance, which is one of the main opposition parties, has been very critical. They're saying that if Eskom's making a profit, they don't need to increase tariffs.
Right. Okay, so there's definitely this financial accountability thing.
Yeah.
But Business Tech and Engineering News, they also point to the political pressure around Eskom.
Absolutely. And the energy minister has even criticized the proposed hikes.
Really?
Which adds another layer of complexity to it.
Yeah.
It kind of makes you think that there are some political calculations going on here, maybe even, some competing interests within the government.
Oh, interesting. And then Engineering News brought up Professor Anton Eberhard.
Right.
Who's a prominent energy expert.
Yes.
And he points to flaws in the regulatory system itself.
Yeah, he's basically arguing that the current system gives Eskom too much leeway.
Yeah.
They can basically request and receive tariff increases without really any scrutiny or being held accountable.
Wow. So it's like this tangled web. It's like financial mismanagement. It's political maneuvering, and it's a potentially flawed regulatory system, and it's all kind of coming together around Eskom.
Exactly. And I think it's a really good example of kind of the bigger picture of what's happening in South Africa. All these different challenges, all these different problems that are all kind of intertwined.
Yeah. So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about another really hot topic. Black economic empowerment. BE.
Right.
So this is obviously a policy that's meant to kind of address these huge inequalities stemming from apartheid. But it seems like more and more it's coming under fire.
Yeah, it's a really complicated issue. And even Elon Musk, he's the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, he's weighed in on this.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's been really vocal in his criticisms of the BEE ownership rules. Specifically, this requirement that businesses like his Starlink, which is his satellite internet company, have to have 30% Black ownership to operate in South Africa.
Okay.
And he's arguing that's just a barrier to international investment, and it ends up hurting the very people that it's trying to help.
Right. So it's one of those things where you have good intentions, but maybe not such good outcomes.
Yeah, exactly. It's really hard to find that balance between trying to fix those historical wrongs.
Yeah.
And also encouraging economic growth, attracting foreign investment. It's a tough one.
Yeah, for sure. And MoneyWeb also mentioned this whole plan by the trade minister to create this massive 100 billion rand Black empowerment fund.
Right.
By taxing existing businesses.
Yeah.
And the DA is pushing back on that pretty hard, saying it's punishing successful businesses and it's going to stifle growth.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that BEE is a really, really controversial topic, and there are a lot of strong feelings on both sides. But I think it raises a really, really important question. How do you fix these historical injustices? How do you create a sustainable future for everyone? How do you create prosperity? It's something South Africa is still trying to figure out.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's the whole land expropriation without compensation thing.
Right, yeah.
This has been in the news for a while now.
Yeah, it's a really controversial topic. The BBC reported that President Ramaphosa signed a law allowing the state to seize land without compensation in some cases.
Yeah.
So it's a really bold move, and it's obviously aimed at addressing, the legacy of apartheid, all these inequalities in land ownership that still exist.
Right, right.
But it has been met with a lot of criticism.
Yeah.
The BBC article also pointed out, you have opposition parties that are concerned. You have some economists that are worried about what this could mean for the economy.
Right.
Could it discourage investment? Could it create uncertainty? Could it lead to all kinds of legal challenges that just drag this process out even longer?
Right. So we've got Eskom having their own issues.
Yeah.
We've got this debate about BEE. We've got the land expropriation. It seems like South Africa's got a lot on its plate economically.
It does. And it's important to remember all of these challenges are connected. They're not isolated incidents. They're all kind of pointing to deeper problems within the South African economy and also within the political landscape as well.
Right. It's like a giant puzzle where all the pieces are linked. You can't really understand one without understanding the others.
Exactly.
So what do you think? What really sticks out to you so far in what we've discussed?
I'm curious to hear what jumped out at you the most. What are you kind of thinking about at this point? What questions do you have? What parts of this are just really sticking in your mind? We're going to come back in just a minute and really, really dive deeper into all of this and try to figure out what it all means for the future of South Africa. So stick with us. We've got a lot more to talk about. So, it's interesting how all of these internal challenges that we've been talking about, Eskom, BEE, land reform, they're all kind of happening at the same time that the global landscape is shifting.
Yeah. You're right. And speaking of that global landscape,
Yeah.
that leads us to this whole question of South Africa's relationship with the U.S.
Right.
Things seem a little frosty maybe?
Yeah, there's definitely some tension there. The Parle Post reported that the U.S. has put a hold on PEPFAR funding for South Africa, which helps support HIV and AIDS programs.
Right.
And they said it was part of this review that the Trump administration is doing of foreign aid.
Okay, but that podcast commentary we mentioned earlier?
Yeah.
They basically said that South Africa is being anti-American.
Yeah, they were pretty outspoken about it. They were arguing that South Africa's actions, on the world stage, specifically their stance on the Russia-Ukraine conflict and their relationship with China, are seen as going against U.S. interests.
Oh, so it's like South Africa's stuck in this tug of war between the U.S. and its rivals.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's one way to look at it. And this podcast was suggesting that there could be serious consequences for South Africa if they're seen as siding with the wrong side, so to speak.
Oh, like what kind of consequences are they talking about?
Well, they were talking about sanctions. They were talking about a withdrawal of support from the U.S. and international forums, potentially even trade restrictions.
Yeah.
I don't know if all of that's going to happen, but it does make you think about the potential risks of South Africa's, foreign policy approach.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation for sure. Because on the one hand, South Africa's got this long history of close ties with the U.S.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, they're obviously trying to be more independent.
Yeah.
Got to forge their own path in the world.
Right. And that's where the challenge lies.
Yeah.
Can they maintain those ties with the U.S. while also, pursuing relationships and taking stances that might go against American interests?
Yeah. Yeah. And can they really afford to upset a partner like the U.S. right now, especially given all the economic problems they're facing internally? I mean, it's not like they're in a really strong position right now.
Exactly. They're really walking a tightrope here.
Yeah.
And if they fall off, it could have serious consequences.
So we've got Eskom in a mess.
Yeah.
We've got this debate about BE. We've got the land expropriation issue. And now we've got this question about their relationship with the U.S. Where does all of this leave South Africa?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I think it it makes us think about a couple of key things.
Oh, great.
First of all of these challenges are connected,
Right.
like we've been talking about. These are not isolated incidents.
Mm-hmm.
These are all symptoms of bigger problems in the South African economy,
Yeah.
and also in their political system as well.
Right. It's like that giant puzzle we talked about.
Exactly.
All the pieces are connected.
Exactly. Yeah. And the second thing, and I think this is even more important, all of this is happening while the world is changing really quickly.
Right.
You've got the rise of China, you've got Russia becoming more assertive, you've got the US kind of changing its priorities, and all of that makes it really unpredictable and challenging for a country like South Africa.
Yeah. So it's not just about fixing your problems internally.
Right.
It's about figuring out how they fit into this new global order.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting, because it's not about picking a side.
Yeah.
It's about figuring out what their own vision is for the future.
Yeah.
And finding a way to make that vision a reality in this new world.
That's a tough job, especially for a country that's facing so many problems at home.
It is, but I think it's also an opportunity. An opportunity for South Africa to really rethink what its role is in the world, to decide what's important to them, and to find new partners that share those values.
So like they're at a crossroads.
Yeah, I think so. They've got some really difficult choices to make, and those choices are going to have a big impact on their future. But before we get into that, I want to hear from you. What are you thinking about all this?
Yeah, what's your take on South Africa's place in the world and all the challenges they're facing? We're going to be back in a minute to keep exploring this. We're going to talk about what the future might hold for South Africa, so don't go anywhere. Okay, so we're back, and thinking about all these challenges, Eskom, BEE, land reform, international relations, one thing that really stands out to me is this kind of like sense of dilemma. Like almost every issue is presented as this either shooter with no easy answers.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think we see that a lot. With BEE, it's about finding that balance between fixing the past and making sure the economy can grow. With land reform, it's about righting those historical wrongs, but also making sure things are stable so investors feel confident. And then with foreign policy, it's about how do they, stay friends with the US, but also be more independent on the world stage.
Yeah, it's like they're constantly being pulled in different directions.
Exactly. And I think all of that gets even more complicated when you think about what's happening in the world right now. Like we were saying earlier, things are changing fast.
Yeah.
The global landscape is really unpredictable.
Right.
And it makes it really tough for a country like South Africa that's trying to figure out where it fits in.
Yeah, it's like that old saying, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe that means South Africa needs to change how it thinks about these challenges. Maybe instead of trying to please everyone all the time, they need to focus on what they want. What are their priorities?
Right.
What's their vision for the future? And then go after that, even if it means making some people unhappy.
So you're saying South Africa needs to be more assertive, more independent?
In a way, yeah. I think it's about recognizing that they have a unique role to play in the world. It's not just about taking aid or being a pawn in somebody else's game. They can be a leader.
Yeah.
They have the potential to really make a difference.
But can they really afford to like alienate the U.S. right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question that there would be some risks involved.
Right.
They could lose access to markets. They could lose aid.
Yeah.
But I also wonder if maybe relying so much on those things has actually held South Africa back. Maybe they haven't been able to reach their full potential because they've been so focused on keeping those external partners happy.
So maybe it's about finding new partners.
Right. New markets, new investments, ones that are more aligned with what South Africa wants to achieve.
Yeah, it's about building an economy that's more resilient, more self-sufficient. Not so dependent on other countries.
Exactly. And I think that comes back to that idea of defining their own vision. What do they want South Africa to be? What kind of partnerships do they want? What kind of future do they want for their people?
Those are questions that South Africans are going to have to answer for themselves. But I think the answers are going to be important not just for South Africa, but for other countries too.
Right.
Other countries that are dealing with the same kinds of issues and same kinds of dilemmas.
Exactly. And that's what makes South Africa's story so interesting. It's not just about one country. It's about bigger things. It's about economic justice. It's about the legacy of colonialism. It's about how power is shifting in the world. These are things that affect everyone.
It reminds us that we're all connected. What happens in one part of the world matters everywhere else. And that's why it's so important to learn about these things, to really understand them.
Absolutely, yeah. To be informed, to be thoughtful, to be engaged.
Yeah. To remember that the world is always changing, and we all have a role to play in shaping what that change looks like.
Well said, well said.
Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up our deep dive into South Africa. We've covered a lot today. We've talked about the challenges they're facing. We've talked about the tough choices they have to make. We've even talked about what the future might hold.
We really hope you'll keep thinking about these things. Go back and check out those sources we talked about, do some more research, form your own opinions.
Yeah, because in a world that's as complex as ours, understanding these kinds of stories, these kinds of challenges, it's more important than ever.
Until next time, keep on diving deep.